When one person goes missing without a trace, it is baffling enough. But what if two people go missing at the same time? Now what if their cars go missing with them too? Definitely not a common missing person scenario, but it does happen. Today we're going to talk about 4 lesser known cases of married couples who go missing along with their cars. Let's first head to Canada to talk about Ronald and Terry. Ronald Yakimchuk and Terry Pettit were a couple from Canada who had been married for 2 years. By all accounts, they were very well liked and an affable pair. Terry was described as a free spirit and a feminist who worked as a journalist. Ronald was described as a very pleasant guy and the salt of the earth who did a good job balancing out Terry. The couple had a group of close friends whom they lived with in a sort of commune. The couple and their friends worked on an alternative newspaper called the Poundmaker. They were ready for a change, though. Terry had quit her job as a reporter at the Edmonton Journal, and Ronald had left his job as the editor of the Poundmaker. They had plans in the summer of 1973 to make the drive to attend their friend Brian Campbell's wedding. The couple then planned to continue on and would take all of their belongings to the Maritimes area in eastern Canada in hopes of starting a new life there. Their friends were sad to see them leave, but they were excited for them to make a new start. The couple loaded up their car and left on their journey. However, their trip would not go as planned. It is reported that the couple left on June 9, 1973. Of course, this was well before cell phones, so there wasn't much communication with their friends or family on the first part of their trip. The couple would take their battered 1959 Volkswagen Beetle. The car itself was described by their friends as the most undependable car in the world. It was faded red with an off-green hood and rear fender. It was said to have everything stripped out of it as it had been used to deliver the newspapers that the group produced. It also had prior problems when the brakes failed and the handbrake had to be used until Ronald fixed it. The car was said to be overloaded with the couple's belongings along with a 10-foot wide kayak strapped to the top of it. In fact, their friend Rod Mickelberg bet them $50 that they wouldn't get to their destination without some sort of a major repair job. He didn't realize how prophetic that bet would become. From what can be pieced together, the couple visited friends in Brandon, Manitoba on June 11th. On June 12th, the couple apparently had reached the town of Dryden, which was roughly halfway to their first destination of their friend's wedding in Montreal. That is known because of the postmark and the date on a postcard that Terry sent to Rod Mickelberg, the friend who they made the bet with. The postcard only had one word on it, nah, kind of like her sticking out her tongue, thought to be her humorously indicating that they would win the bet about the car making it. Unfortunately, that would be the last time the couple was ever heard from. The couple's friend Brian Campbell looked forward to seeing his 2 friends at his wedding on June 16, 1973. He was a little disappointed, however, when they never showed. He wasn't really concerned, though, and just figured they were running late and would stop by a few days later. Since the couple had vague plans about exactly where they were going after the wedding, their family or friends had no reason to worry. No one even realized it at the time, but the couple was now missing. It's unclear exactly when Ronald and Terry's family and friends realized that something was wrong. After a few weeks without hearing from them, their friends started to become concerned. As time would pass and no contact from the couple, their families would eventually report them as missing. Terry had purchased a cash draft from her bank in Edmonton, which is similar to a money order, before they left on their trip. She was going to cash it when they got to Ottawa, but it was in fact never cashed. The couple's friend Winston Garelick reported that Terry told them they were going away and nobody would find them for a while. Police did a few records checks, but the family said that the police didn't really put any effort into finding them until 7 months after they went missing in early of 1974. The police said that they were adults and they could go missing if they wanted to. They were free spirits and didn't have a clear-cut plan or destination, so their statement was valid. However, it is thought they wouldn't have purposely not contacted their friends or family for long periods of time. So it seems that something must have happened to the couple, but what? Of course, the most logical theory was that it had to do with their car. It was unreliable, overloaded, and even had the brakes go out on it in the not-so-distant past. When Ronald fixed the brakes, it is unknown whether he temporarily fixed them or completely replaced them. Their friends were uneasy seeing them drive off in that hazard, but it was their only source of transportation, and they had made up their minds to leave, so what could they do? But if the reason for their disappearance was the failure of their car, why wasn't it ever found? It would have certainly stood out with it being faded red with the green hood and fender and a white kayak strapped to the top. The license was Alberta CA3-262. There were a few possible sightings of the car, so let's talk about them. Unfortunately, these accounts of possible sightings are pretty vague, and I couldn't find any follow-up. I'm assuming since there are no media reports that they either weren't checked out completely or found out not to be the couple's car. I can't be certain of that, however. The first one is a friend who saw a battered VW being used as a lawn ornament. However, it is unclear if this sighting was even brought to law enforcement's attention. There was also a report in 1980 that police found a car matching the description of the VW at a remote back road about 310 miles east of Dryden. Remember, Dryden is the town where the couple mailed the postcard from. In a newspaper article in the Gazette dated 1980, it was reported that a couple named Bill and Muriel Winslow from Peterborough, Ontario, claimed to have seen the missing car in 1978. They were driving in Ontario onto a lane off Highway 11, 50 miles east of Longlock, on a seldom-used gas inspection lane. They read an article about the missing couple in 1980 and told the police what they had seen. The police were actually able to locate the vehicle in question. However, it had no engine, no license plate, and no tires. It was said that the missing couple's vehicle had a hidden serial number and other identifying marks that police would look for. But I could find no other follow-up articles that mentioned if police were able to tell where that car was from. There was another sighting of interest, but this one was supposedly of the couple as well as a stranger. However, the date of this sighting was interesting. In a 2007 article in the Edmonton Journal, they talk about a sighting by Vivian McCrory. This appears to be the first time this sighting was reported in the media, but she said right after her encounter that she told the police about it, but they didn't seem too interested. Mrs. McCrory is adamant that the sighting was in late July of 1973, though, over a month after the couple was last heard from. It was outside Parry Sound, Ontario. She said that 3 people were standing beside a faded red VW Bug with Alberta license plates. She remembers the encounter well because the car had apparently stalled and was still partially in the southbound driving lane of Highway 69, so her husband had to swerve and slam on the brakes to avoid the disabled car. The engine hood was up and there was no sign of the kayak. When they drove by the 3 people, they didn't pay attention to the couple. Mrs. McCrory states that there was a little woman with blonde hair who had a man standing behind her that she didn't get a good look at, who wasn't much taller than the woman standing on the left-hand side in front of the vehicle. This is important to note because Ronald was several inches taller than Terry. The third person she saw was a tall, slim fellow with a hippie haircut, thought to possibly be Ronald, who was standing more in the ditch. She said it seemed a little strange that the woman and the shorter man were standing so close together. She couldn't tell if they were being threatened, though. Although the date of this sighting is questionable, since it was weeks after the couple had been sighted, the police said they did have someone else who reported an experience with the Volkswagen around the same time, but the police declined to give further details into that sighting. With the car being in such an unreliable state, there is a theory that the car and the couple's remains may be in the water. When you remember the fact that their friend said the brakes had previously gone out on the old car, it definitely seems plausible. Many people think that they may be in Lake Superior, which is huge and deep, but there are also many small lakes in the area where the couple was traveling. Being concerned with the state of their vehicle, some of their friends did warn them against traveling on the hilly Trans-Canada Highway and recommended that they head south to cross the U.S. border at International Falls onto Duluth and then re-enter Canada. But the couple didn't seem very interested in doing that. There is another theory that is more sinister. If the couple's car did become disabled, it would have put them in a vulnerable state. In the early 1970s, I'm sure it wouldn't have been out of the ordinary for someone to stop and offer assistance. Of course, we don't know if they may have come to harm or were even murdered by someone with sinister motives under the guise of helping them. I do find it a bit strange that no trace of them or their car, that we know of, has ever been located. This disappearance being now 52 years old, their family and friends have made peace that they will never see them again. In honor of the beloved couple, there is a headstone for them in Ronald's hometown of Alberta, Canada, with their date of death listed as June 1973, and the inscription reading, "Fondly loved and mourned by all." The next case we're going to talk about is both disturbing and sad. Frank and Mary Oliva were a couple who had been married for 52 years and lived in Wilbur, Nebraska. Frank was 76 and Mary was 79. They were well thought of in their small town. They had one living son, Frank Jr. Sadly, Mary's son from a prior marriage, Victor Philippi, died in 1959 at the age of 41. A little over a year later, the couple's daughter, Helen Cotis, would pass away in 1960 at age 33 from polio. Being at an advanced age, the couple has started to struggle with health issues. Mary is said to have had heart problems, high blood pressure, as well as increasing memory issues. Her husband helped to care for her as best he could, and their daughter-in-law, Shirley, had been helping her in-laws more and more with things around the house. Shirley had gone to the couple's home on August 3, 1973, and was surprised to find the house empty. Frank and Mary Oliva were gone. Shirley found the scene of the house odd. The newspapers were piling up, and their milk had been delivered. Their door was shut but not locked, and all of the windows were open. What the neighbors had to say would heighten Shirley's concern. The neighbors said that they hadn't seen the couple in nearly a week, and the last time they did see them, their actions were very unusual. On July 28, 1973, they said the couple arrived back home between 8 and 9 p.m. That was not normal for them, as they didn't usually venture out that late and hadn't driven at night in quite some time. What the neighbor would then see was unsettling. After arriving home, about 15 minutes later, the couple would emerge from their house, and Mary was said to now be wearing her housecoat. Then the couple left again in their two-tone beige 1958 Chevy 210, only this time they would not return. When Frank Oliva Jr. heard from his wife that his parents hadn't been home in almost a week, he reported them missing with the police. The investigation then began. The couple hadn't taken any belongings. Mary's black purse that she always had with her was left behind, as well as her medication for her heart condition. There were some blood-stained cloths found at the couple's home, but it is thought to have possibly been from Mary's recent dental procedure. Here is what is known of the days leading up to the couple's disappearance. 2 weeks before they disappeared, Frank Oliva went into the Wilbur Mobile Service Station and picked up a Kansas-Nebraska road map. This seemed a little odd considering the couple rarely even ventured outside the county. Mary Oliva had undergone dental surgery on July 24th and 26th. She reportedly was depressed and had been in poor health for quite some time. Then on July 27th, the couple is seen visiting the cemetery where their daughter was buried. On July 28th, the day of the disappearance, Frank Oliva was all over town. He was very active that day, more so than usual. He had obtained some pain pills that day for his wife at her dentist. He was also said to be depressed over his wife's health. A policeman reported to have seen the couple driving through Legion Park after dark on the night they went missing. That is much later than the couple would usually be out. After the couple was reported missing, there were 150 people involved in searching the ground, air, and river. One of the searches was focused on a gravel pit southeast of Wilbur after an oil slick was seen on the water. Scuba divers dove on the pit, but all that was found was an empty 50-gallon oil drum. The police believe that the couple driving into one of the several local sand pits is a logical one, noting that the murky-filled excavations often are laden with sand and gravel ledges that can collapse and bury a heavy object if it hits them and causes them to break loose. They also checked with the Mayo Clinic, as Mary had often talked about going there for a checkup and had gone there 3 years earlier. There was no trace of the couple. There was some brief optimism for a resolution a few years later when in April of 1977, the Colorado Highway Patrol requested the couple's dental records to compare them with the man and woman found near Trinidad, Colorado, but unfortunately they were not a match. In an article 9 years later in the Lincoln Journal-Star, it said that the case of the disappearance of the Olivas had been closed and that the couple's name had been removed from the NCIC. It is believed by many that the couple disappeared willingly. Given Mary's health issues and the couple growing older, the family said that Frank Oliva wouldn't hear of putting his wife in a care center. He felt that nursing homes were just junkyards for old people. Did the couple decide to end their lives instead of continuing to grow old? That is what their family and law enforcement believe. They left that night as soon as it turned dark, which was very uncommon for them. Did they do so they would not be easy to spot? They took no clothing or belongings of any kind with them, and important medication was left behind. I also found a comment online from one of the Oliva's great-grandchildren that I found interesting. She said that shortly before the Olivas disappeared and about a month before her birthday, her grandpa Oliva gave her a gift because, as he stated, he wouldn't be there to give it to me on my birthday. She also said that her family had heard Frank Oliva mention a cave that he knew of where no one would ever be found. There was a search for the Olivas documented in a YouTube video from Adventures with Purpose that was posted a few years ago. Despite their best efforts, sadly they did not find the couple, but agreed that they could be under an old sand pit in the area. It appears that the family was resigned to the fact soon after they disappeared that the Olivas were no longer alive. Still, they would love to find their remains and give them a proper burial. There was already a headstone for the Olivas. It was purchased by their son Frank Oliva Jr., who sadly passed away in 2017, and lists their date of death as 1973. His decision to put a headstone up for his missing parents is poignant. He said, "You had to put a stone there. If you didn't, that's two people that never were." The third case that we're going to talk about is puzzling. It's about a couple who goes missing right in the middle of a big bustling city, but decades later they still cannot be found. Edward and Stefania Andrews were a married couple who resided in Arlington Heights, a suburb of Chicago. Edward was an office manager and a bookkeeper for Miller Peerless Manufacturing Company. Stefania was a credit investigator for a local loan company. The couple were both 62 and both had planned to retire at the end of the year. The date of this mystery is May 15, 1970. I feel that it's important to talk about the events of earlier that day that the couple went missing before we get into this mystery. That morning, Edward would drive his wife to her job and then went to his office. At noon, he met a few friends and former colleagues for lunch at Pizzeria Uno. His friends say that Edward fell ill, was pale, and didn't eat. Apparently, he was starting to feel a little better, so he drove his friend to the train station and then returned to work. Later in the afternoon, a coworker noticed that Edward looked ill and was resting his head in his hands. The couple then arrived around 6 p.m. at the Sheraton Chicago Hotel on North Michigan Avenue for the cocktail party. It was sponsored by the Chicago chapter of the Women's Association of the Allied Beverage Association. They parked their car in the underground hotel garage and took the elevator to the King Arthur room. Other guests at the party say that Edward Andrews looked ill and complained of being hungry. Other partygoers said that he did drink alcohol and that all he ate was some canapes. The couple would then leave the party at 9:30 p.m., but as far as what happened after that, it is still unknown. The couple would leave in the elevator, where the last person known to have seen them is Anthony Morelli, the parking manager. He said that Edward Andrews was staggering and had trouble getting in the car. The couple then got in their black and yellow 1969 Oldsmobile and proceeded to leave the garage, whereas Edward literally hit the garage exit door. Mr. Morelli then pokes his head in the car and tells Edward Andrews he shouldn't drive, and Stefania Andrews nods at him in agreement, and she looked like she'd been crying. The next thing he knows, the car sped out of the parking garage south onto Michigan Avenue. That was the last time the Andrews and their car were ever seen. When the couple missed a party they were to attend the next night, and both didn't arrive at work on Monday morning, they were reported missing and an investigation was started. Police went to the couple's home, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. All of their clothes seemed to be there, and no suitcases were taken. The couple's bank account and 14 credit cards had no activity on them and still have been unused since their disappearance. It did not appear that they had been home since May 15th, when they arrived there after work and got ready for the cocktail party. Police also did a check of Chicago area parking lots, hospitals, morgues, as well as a check of accident reports. Also, a nationwide alert on the couple's license plate number proved fruitless. Law enforcement had a theory about what may have happened that night after the couple left the party. They speculate that Edward Andrews may have mistakenly turned south into Lower Michigan Avenue's northbound lanes. Crossing the Michigan Avenue Bridge, he may have realized his mistake and tried a U-turn, where no guardrail exists, and plunged into the Chicago River south of the hotel. The river was dragged on June 3rd and again on August 7th, but scuba divers didn't find anything noteworthy. Sonar also failed to find the car, and since the river was only 16 feet deep with a weak current, it isn't thought that anything as large as a car could have been washed away. In 1971, there were additional searches of the Chicago River as well as adjacent areas of Lake Michigan. A sonar technician said he was 95% sure the car was not in that area. There was speculation by a detective that a barge could have crushed the Andrews car into the river bottom or pushed it out into Lake Michigan. Their case grew cold quickly, and the couple was declared dead officially in 1978. Then in 1994, the disappearance would get some renewed attention. Working on a tip from a 36-year-old man from Knollwood in Lake County, Illinois, police began searching a pond near Green Oaks. The tip said that the couple was murdered, stuffed in the trunk, and that they and their car were disposed of in the pond. He claimed that he didn't come forward sooner because he'd suffered from amnesia. The police admitted at the time that it could prove to be a wild goose chase, but from what information the tipster provided, it warranted a preliminary search. During their search, they did recover 2 pieces of metal that resembled a car, and initial newspaper reports say that they did find a large piece of metal at the bottom of the murky pond that could have been a car, but it was several feet deep, buried in the muck, so it wasn't able to be identified. Police did seem extremely skeptical about this tipster's information, so they wanted to question him further before proceeding with an expensive search that would involve dredging the area and lifting the object out of the water. They also wanted to locate and question the people from Lake County that the tipster named who were involved in the alleged crime. There is really no more information about this search, so I'm guessing it was determined to not be their vehicle at the bottom of the pond, or perhaps they were able to discredit the unnamed tipster. While researching the Andrews disappearance, I stumbled upon another tragic disappearance of a couple in their car. Although this case had a pretty quick resolution, and it is thought to know why they disappeared, I thought I would mention it since we're talking about couples going missing along with their cars. This disappearance involves Elmo and Edna Batterton. The couple, who were both in their 50s, lived near Peoria, Illinois, in the small town of Morton. They lived a modest lifestyle, but with Elmo owning businesses as well as property, he was reported to be a millionaire. The couple was last seen on December 11, 1984, in the parking lot of a restaurant in Peoria, where they left in their 1977 dark blue Mercedes-Benz. That was the last time the couple would ever be seen together or alive. They were officially reported missing 2 days later, and a search began. A little over 2 months later, on February 23, 1985, one part of this mystery would have a resolution when 2 workers at a grain elevator would see a body floating in the channel of the Illinois River. Elmo Batterton had now been found. Judging by the condition of his remains, it was thought he'd been in the water since his disappearance 2 months earlier. After 2 more days of diligent searching, the rest of this tragic disappearance would be solved when the couple's car with Edna Batterton still inside would be found on February 25, 1985. It was located in a channel in Pekin near the restaurant where the couple had dined before they left on their fateful trip. There were no signs of foul play on either body. After interviewing friends and family, police believe this tragedy was a double suicide. They say that Elmo Batterton had been depressed at some struggles with his businesses. They also said the day before they disappeared, Elmo gave a friend a diamond ring of great sentimental value. He had bought the ring when he made his first million. He also gave this friend a couple of sacks of silver coins said to be worth $30,000. With what little we know, and Elmo giving away his prized possessions right before they go missing, I do agree that this was, however, tragic, but it was not an accident. I will include a picture of the Battertons in my article on this case, posted on my website at Lost and Found Blogs. I have decided to include another photo that was published in a newspaper at the time of the discovery of Edna's remains that really surprised me. You cannot see Edna, but the couple's car is dangling above the water as it was being removed. Edna's remains are inside but covered by a tarp. I decided to include it because it is a sad and chilling visual reminder of just how incredibly sad this case is. The fourth and final case we're going to talk about today is the very mysterious disappearance of Jack and Patricia Giroux. The couple lived at 735 LeBon Parkway in Clayton, Missouri, a suburb of St. Louis, and they had 4 children. Jack was 48 and was a tool and die maker. Patricia was 45 and taught math for the Rockwood School District. The only child who lived with them at the time of this story was their 17-year-old daughter, Joanne. It was June of 1975, and the couple's son, 24-year-old Ed Giroux, had been trying to call his parents all weekend with no answer. He wanted to take them out for dinner on Father's Day. He would eventually go to their house to check on them, and what he found would concern him. There was no trace of Jack or Patricia. Their cars were in the garage, their keys, wallet, and money were in their bedroom. The garage and windows were unlocked. Surprisingly, their dog was left in the yard with no food or water. On June 17th, Ed Giroux would then report his parents as missing. The police started a search for the couple right away. In addition to the areas involved in a typical missing persons search, they would also search neighborhood sewers and dig up an area in the yard where the Giroux had a garden. It came to light that the couple had just purchased 10 acres of land where they had planned to build their retirement home, and it was searched as well. There was no trace of them. But it was what the couple's daughter Joanne would tell the police that would make this disappearance even more strange. According to Joanne, her and her father had argued prior to her parents' disappearance. The accounts of what she told police vary somewhat, but she said the argument was on the night of June 10th. It was focused on her lifestyle choices, drug use, and boyfriends. According to Joanne, her parents told her they wanted her out of the house by their return on Sunday. After the argument was over, she said her parents went down to the basement and started drinking. The next time she saw them was the next morning. She said that her parents were going to a funeral and she saw her father tuck his .38 caliber Smith & Wesson gun in his pants before he left. Her father promised to give her a phone number where they could be reached in case of an emergency. She then claimed that a man in a green limo picked her parents up and they left at 10:30 a.m. on June 11, 1975. They would never return. Joanne goes on to say that her boyfriend came up from Louisiana on the next day, Thursday, June 12th, and helped her pack up her belongings. Then on Friday, she called her sister Kathleen and asked if she could stay at her apartment for the weekend, and Kathleen agreed. There was really nothing noteworthy about the couple since then except a brief newspaper article on the 20th anniversary of their disappearance. When I was doing my research on this case, I came upon an interesting thread on Reddit on the True Crime Board. I have no idea if this is accurate information, but I wanted to mention it as honestly I had never heard anything like it with any other case that I've read about. It was originally posted from a user called OP, who it appears has since removed their account. They claim that on July 11, 2019, between 4:50 p.m. and 6 p.m., they found many discarded flyers concerning the Giroux's disappearance discarded, not distributed, on School Street in Beverly, Massachusetts. Yes, you heard that right, Massachusetts, more than 1,200 miles from the couple's home. I will attach a picture of one of the flyers that the Reddit poster says they found on my website at Lost and Found Blogs. They claim that after their discovery, they did report the finding to the Beverly Police Department. So let's talk about the flyers being discovered. It appears that they were recent, as it talks about the age Patricia would be the year the flyers were discovered. So if someone wanted to bring more attention to a 44-year-old double disappearance, that is definitely a good thing. Could someone have developed an interest in helping get more attention to it? It doesn't seem logical that you would distribute flyers 1,200 miles away from the location where they went missing. What's even more strange than the flyers being made is the fact that the flyers were being thrown away. I can't even think of a logical explanation for this. Like I said, it's not 100% confirmed that this did happen, but there is a picture of a flyer created concerning the disappearance on the post. I guess regardless of whether what was posted on Reddit was accurate, it did give some more brief attention to this case. There was a lot to discuss regarding the daughter and her version of events. She claimed that the day after her parents left for the funeral, she moved out. The date of move out would have been June 12th. According to reports, Joanne moves in with her sister temporarily and then goes to live with her brother in Minnesota. An unfortunate factor in this case is that if the story we hear is correct, the Giroux weren't reported missing until 6 days after their disappearance. As far as their daughter, did she not report her parents missing or feed the family dog because she was gone, as she said, and did not know that they never returned from the funeral? Or another more sinister theory that has been mentioned was, did the fight with their daughter play a role in their disappearance? Did the fight get physical, and were Jack and Patricia Giroux harmed, or even worse? Was Joanne's boyfriend involved in any way? If Joanne knew they weren't going to return to their home, could that be why she didn't alert authorities that her parents were gone? All just speculation, of course, but we do want to discuss all possibilities. Perhaps everything the Giroux's daughter Joanne said is correct. Even if taken at face value, the events of that day seem odd at best. There is no mention in any online source or newspaper article whose funeral they were going to. I find it strange that who the actual funeral was for isn't reported in the accounts of that day. I'm curious if the police were able to verify if they were going to a funeral. Was there even a funeral? Did anyone at the funeral see the couple and the mystery man they left with? You would think the couple's children, especially the daughter still living with them, would know at least whose funeral it was. Or is that something the police have chosen to not release? Joanne claims that her father put his gun in his pants as he left for the funeral. They bring a gun but leave their wallets and money at home. That is odd. Then we have a green limo driven by a mystery man picking up the couple for a funeral. I say mystery man because it doesn't appear that their daughter knew who it was because it wasn't mentioned who. I would think that the person who picked up the couple but didn't appear to return them would certainly need to be questioned. It is also mentioned that the Giroux family were given polygraphs. They all passed except for their daughter Joanne, whose is said to have been inconclusive. There could be a few reasons for this. She is thought to have been doing drugs around the time, which was the main reason for her parents to be kicking her out. She was also under a lot of stress due to the fact that her parents were missing, and she was apparently the last person to see them, not counting the mystery man. Or did Joanne not pass a lie detector test simply because she was lying? It has also come into question whether her parents being picked up in a green limo is correct. It is mentioned in at least one article that police discovered there was a green limo in the area around that time, but it was there for a neighbor. If this is true, did Joanne make up that her parents left in one, or did she see one in the neighborhood and assume it was who picked her parents up for the funeral? This case is so frustrating as there is very little coverage out there, and there doesn't seem to be any developments and really no leads to look into. Now it is time for my thoughts on these 4 cases of missing couples. First, concerning Ronald Yakimchuk and Terry Pettit. If I were have to give my opinion, I would lean towards the brakes failing or some other mechanical malfunction happening which forced them into the water. I think it is plausible since it seems the couple were driving in an area they weren't necessarily very familiar with. Along those same lines, they could have driven into the water at night without knowing it until it was too late. While I don't think it's the most logical scenario, I also think it's possible that Ron and Terry could have met with foul play. Considering it was the 1970s and hitchhiking being quite popular, and with them driving an unreliable car, perhaps they accepted a ride with a stranger and came to harm. I will say that I could see them being the type of people to help out a hitchhiker as well, but I don't think they could have fit a passenger in their VW Bug packed full of their belongings. If the scenario with them accepting a ride is what happened, it is a little surprising that their car wouldn't have been located. But a VW Bug wouldn't be that hard to get rid of, especially with so many bottles of water along the route. Now concerning the heartbreaking case of Frank and Mary Oliva, as far as my thoughts, I do think the couple chose to leave and end their lives that day. Their actions were not typical of them, and with the depression the couple were said to be going through, along with a few cryptic comments about being gone, I think it is a logical conclusion. I believe that Frank chose a place, perhaps the sand pit, where he believed that they would never be found. I'm unsure if he thought this would spare his family pain and they would just never know for sure, but I believe it made it worse. This is such a sad case, and it's terrible what the family has gone through all these years not knowing for sure and not being able to locate them and put them under the headstone that they lovingly bought for them. Now for my thoughts on Edward and Stefania Andrews. This disappearance is strange in that a couple disappears in the middle of a city full of people, yet no one knows where their car actually went, and after many searches and 55 years passing, they still cannot locate them or their car. It seems a plausible scenario that they accidentally drove into the water that night. Edward had not been feeling well and had apparently consumed alcohol at the party. Plus, by what the attendant witnessed, he appears to have left the parking garage driving recklessly. These things, combined with him driving at night, could have definitely caused him to lose focus and take a wrong turn into the water. It appears the couple was happy and enjoyed socializing and living their life, so I think it's more likely that they died that night in a tragic accident and did not purposely drive into the water or decide to disappear. As far as Elmo and Edna Batterton, it is terribly sad to think of a couple, only in their 50s, who felt that they had nothing more to live for. But I believe them driving into the water was their choice. I was a little curious as they mentioned some ways that Elmo had acted like he was possibly getting ready to end his life, but I'm curious if Edna had been depressed as well. The authorities seem to think that both the Battertons were in agreement about what transpired that night, so that's all we really have to go on. Incredibly sad case. The Giroux's disappearance is really baffling. The lack of information out there only adds to the mystery. You can't help but look at Joanne's account of that last day with her parents as unusual. There's certainly reason to be suspicious, given their stressful relationship at the time, to not take her version at face value. But if her version is correct, the way her parents left and with whom are very mysterious. Were they involved in something shady, and did that contribute to their disappearance? It's hard to have a clear-cut opinion, as Joanne's account of what happened that day seems odd at best. But if the Giroux's were involved in something private that they didn't want their children to know about, that might better explain the mystery man picking them up, if that in fact did happen. If the Giroux's left with the man willingly, I think they had every intention of returning home. I believe something happened that day that they weren't expecting. This case reminds me so much of the accident or abandon case I published about the Sheltons. With the Giroux's having seemingly vanished into thin air and no more information about the mystery man who Joanne says picked them up and never brought them back, this case seems to be destined to remain the literal definition of an unsolved mystery. So there are 4 tragic cases of couples who go missing in cars and never come back. Since it has now been decades, it is most certain that they are no longer alive. I hope that their families can get answers one day, and we can know more about why these couples vanished and will be together forever. That concludes my podcast on 4 lesser-known cases of couples who disappear along with their cars. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave me a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can listen to my podcasts on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music, listed under one word, Lost and Found Podcast. You can also read all of my original articles on my website at Lost and Found Blogs, and you can reach me via email at lostandfoundpodcast@yahoo. And remember that cold cases stay cold because their story stops getting told.